most education systems are large government systems. And so what I'm writing about generally in how to run a government applies to large government education systems. Actually, I think it applies to small government education systems too, like a small school district in the United States, or even, as I was discussing with a group of school principals, or head teachers as we call them here in England at the weekend, it applies at the level of a school too. So I want to take you through in a few minutes what the key lessons about running a government actually are. And lesson one is decide your priorities. So if you're a government and you want to improve your education system, what exactly do you want to do? What do you want the citizens to see different by the end of your term of office? Is it that you want to improve literacy? Is it you want to improve numeracy? Is it you want to improve the school buildings? Presumably you want to improve the outcomes so that children learn more. But being specific about what your priorities are and how you'd measure progress towards them is lesson one. Sounds like a statement of the obvious, but lots and lots of governments don't do it. When they do it, it creates a degree of political risk because then you've stated what you're trying to do, but it does also give the citizens a clear indication of what you're attempting and they can track your progress. So that's lesson one. And lots of governments around the world have done that very well. For example, Mitch Daniels when he was governor of Indiana, Martin O'Malley when he was governor of Maryland, Blair when he was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and so on. The second lesson is, again, all quite obvious, but requires discipline to do, is to organise your government to deliver the stated priorities. Generally speaking, what we've learned over the last decade as we look at governments around the world, and my book includes examples from every continent, is that by having a part of the centre of the government, if it's an education system, the state education agency, for example, in the US state, or in a wider government in the Prime Minister's office or the centre of the government somewhere, is to have an element of it focused purely on implementation and delivery. So not on policy and strategy, there are lots of other people doing that, but people who are actually making sure that these big things stated in the priorities are actually getting done. And that means that somebody is all the time focused on making sure things get done. When I used to work for Tony Blair, he said to me, as we went through the second term with all the reverberations that came from September the 11th, 2001, he said to me, it's great having you and your team consistently focused 24 hours a day on the things that matter most to the British people. Every government needs something like that. That relentlessly pursues the priorities, whatever crises come up, whatever stories are running in the media, this part of government is purely focused on implementation. If you don't have that, the problem you get is everybody gets involved in the latest policy debate or strategy debate or crisis, and nobody pays attention to the details of getting things done. So that's the second lesson. The third lesson is to have a well thought through evidence-based strategy. Whatever it is you're trying to attempt, whatever results you're trying to deliver, is your approach to delivering it based on evidence? Have you looked around the world for the best examples of education systems achieving the goals, the kind of goals you've set, for example? Have you looked across your own country? Have you looked at the best schools within your own system and seen what they're doing? Is there something you could learn from them that would apply to the whole system? So just to summarise, you've set your priorities, you've organised to deliver, and you've got your strategy and it's based on evidence. Then you need to do some planning. Eisenhower famously said when he was preparing the Normandy landings in 1944, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And the key elements of planning are what are the actions you're going to take and when you're going to take them and who's going to take them. Making sure that you know how the actions you're going to take will change the data. What's the trajectory? How will, let's say you're improving literacy, you know where it is now, you know where you want to get it. How will the data change over time? And finally, what is the delivery chain? What's the connection between you at the centre of the system and a child learning to read, or a teacher changing our practice, and so on? And if you get those three elements of planning worked through, it makes an enormous difference. And it's much better than the classic government plan, which is actually an essay with a glossy cover that is put on a shelf and forgotten about. So that's the fourth thing. Fifth, routines. If you just do one of these things, routines is it. Government is driven by crises and events. There's all these things happening all the time. Things are going wrong. It's true in an education system. It's true in a whole government. But if you get routines built in that focus on the priorities, that check the data, that check the plans are being implemented, that For example, a stock take meeting where you review progress, you have a really honest conversation. Is it working? Is it not working? If it's not working, what are we going to do about it? That kind of routine, relentlessly pursued, makes an enormous difference. And you can do routines in a number of ways, and it depends on the leader. But regular stock take meetings, as I call them, every couple of months on each of the key priorities is one thing. But also actually a monthly note to the leader, a note that says, here's the progress we've made in the last month, this is going well, this is going less well, where it's not going well, this is what we're doing about it, do you agree? All on one side of A4, such as I used to do for Blair. It makes an enormous difference, it just keeps the momentum going. Next lesson is problem solving. As you review progress of the implementation of your plan through the routines, you'll identify things that are going wrong. The question is, what are you going to do about it? And problems are interesting in this sense, because normally when something goes wrong in the government, the first question people ask is, who's to blame? The newspapers say, heads must roll. But actually, once you start asking that question, everybody stops talking, everybody starts getting their knives out and trying to knife other people in the back and mind their own backs. So the first question to ask is not who's to blame, but what are we going to do about it? If you solve the problem first, you may never need to allocate the blame, but if you do, you can leave it till later. But the really important point is, where you've got a problem, do something about it. Don't give the benefit of the doubt. Don't think it'll go away. Make sure that you've checked the nature of the problem and you've got somebody on the case focused on solving it. And then two other lessons then apply. One is, I call it irreversibility, seeing the thing through. There are so many government programs that are announced with a big fanfare, everybody gets very excited about it, and then after a year or two, everybody gets bored, it goes away, nobody can remember what the impact was, and it's gone. And then you think, where did that 100 million or 200 million dollars, pounds, whatever the currency is, go? Irreversibility is about seeing it through so that it's actually embedded in the system, so that the results have changed for the better, so that the culture has changed, so nobody wants to go back to how it was before, and the organisation has changed, so the incentives are different, and so the incentives reinforce going forward as opposed to going back. And that takes, usually with a big change, some years. And then the final thing is about using public money effectively. You might remember in the Old Testament, Joseph, famous from a musical, The Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. But what really is interesting about the Joseph story is this. The Pharaoh wakes up, he's had a dream that there are 7 fat cows in the dream and 7 thin cows, and he doesn't know what the dream means. And he asks all the courtiers, what does this mean? And they don't know, but they say there's this bloke in prison, Joseph. He's really good at dreams, and they drag Joseph from prison. They swing him on the floor in front of the Pharaoh, and he says, what does this mean? And Joseph says, it's very obvious what this means. There's going to be 7 years of plenty, and then there's 7 years of famine. So you have to save 20% of the corn every year for those first 7 years, so that when the other 7 years come, you've got a store of grain, and everybody in Egypt will be okay. So what's this got to do with improving an education system? Look after the money carefully, think 7 or even 14 years out, don't waste money on programs, use it sparingly but effectively, check the progress against the data as Joseph did with the corn, and above all, make sure that the money is funding the things you really care about, the things that will make a difference to delivering outcomes. Too often in education systems, people spend vast sums of money on things that are very unlikely to make any difference to an outcome. So use money wisely is the final lesson. I hope that's been useful to you. Thank you very much for inviting me to join your conference. I hope you have a wonderful time.